I'm still connected, right?
You're still here.
Am I the only one there?
No, no, then we have a couple people on.
Okay.
We have a few minutes. People
All
are,
right, then you'll ring a bell or something, right?
yeah, I'm going to give a few people, we have a few minutes yet till 1 o'clock, and
Okay.
we'll
All
give them
right,
a
I
few
just
to
wanted to
come
make
on
sure I
in.
was still connected.
Yeah, you're here.
All right, lady. Thank
Hi,
you.
Astrid. How are you? Good. You're muted.
Okay, now I'm muted. I'm at Borough Hall with a computer that I just got a 30-second lesson on.
Oh, okay. Well, you're here. That's what counts.
Oh, now you're frozen.
Can everybody hear me?
Julie here.
Yeah, good, good. It's 1 o'clock. I'm just going to give it maybe another minute for a few more people to come on, and then we'll get started.
Great.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to push them to do stuff beyond. Yeah, I mean, like some riprap.
Hi, Betty. Hi, Denise.
Hi, Stu. How are you?
All right, I'm having technical problems here. My normal computer is not working. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, well, I can see and hear you, so.
Yeah, I got my laptop out. So
Okay.
still got to figure this other one out.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and start. We have a few people on the call, and I'm sure, just a couple logistics. I realize people might have to come and go on the call, so, feel free to do that. I'm just going to continue to plug along on the presentation, but just a few logistics. I am going to ask you to hold your questions until the end so we can get through this, and then I'll address all questions at the end. If you do happen to need to leave for any reason, feel free to send your question to me via email or give me a call. I'll be glad to talk you through your question. But again, I'm going to hold all questions until the end of the presentation. Welcome to the 2021 Morris County Trail Construction Grant Program workshop overview. We're excited to kick off our 6th year of the grant, and we have a lot of exciting changes this year, so let's jump in. The grant purpose is to distribute funds for the design and construction of trails, essentially to provide recreational opportunities and improve and enhance the quality of life of Morris County residents. The structure of the program is a collaboration between Morris County Office of Planning and Preservation and the Morris County Park Commission. This program, the Trail Grant Program, is reviewed by an advisory committee of 9 members. 4 members are from the Park Commission Rec Trail Committee. 2 members are from the Planning and Preservation boards or committees like Historic Pres and Open Space. And then we have 3 at-large members from the trail community. The source of the funds for this program come from the Preservation Trust program. In 2014, there was a voter referendum that approved putting a portion of those funds towards the development of trail projects. That was overwhelmingly approved by a 3-to-1 margin. So great support back in 2014 for the program. This year's program, 2021, we have an estimated $1.6 million available for the grant program. That is based on last year's taxes. Just a quick overview of what we've done so far in the last 5 years. We've issued 29 total grants for $3.3 million and nearly a little over 17 miles of trails. So it just gives you an indication of what we've done so far. And all of these grants are only for construction. So that is a hard number of 17 miles on the ground. And I'm happy to say all the grants from 2016 have been completed. So that's a great milestone. Just some dates to jot down and keep on your calendar. The pre-application meetings will be open beginning now through the end of July. So we have a couple of months to do that. The 2-step process of our application, the letter of intent is the first one, and that is due at the end of June. The full application is due at the end of July. And then as always, we try to issue the grant awards by the end of the calendar year, which is a really efficient way to push this out. We do have a Q&A session slated for October 27th. So if you happen to have some clarification needed, we'll be asking you some questions. And we expect that will either be a virtual meeting or in the past, we've also been able to do it via email. So it'll just depend. But no, October 27th. And our recommendations from the committee will come out around Thanksgiving, in this case, November 22nd. And then we'll make, the county commissioners will make their announcements by the end of the year. Just some general requirements of the program. All trails must be on permanently preserved public parkland or private land with a dedicated easement for recreational use. And that is to protect the investment. We don't want to see something constructed and then a few years later be removed or undone, so to speak. There is a 20% match required, and I'll go through that in more detail. And it's important to realize that this program operates on a reimbursement basis. So all grantees need to front the dollars for their projects ahead of time, and as it's completed, you'll be reimbursed. Applicants are limited to one application per calendar year, and applicants must be in good standing with any current grants. And I also want to point out there are requirements of the grantees, and most of that relates to reporting and keeping us up to date on your progress. Oops. There are multiple changes for this year. I think it's very exciting, the direction we're moving. One of the things, all applicants submitting something this year will require to do a pre-application meeting. And we felt this was important because there have been so many changes this year, and we'd like to walk you through them so you know exactly what they are and to give you the best submission possible. This year we are funding what's called a Phase 1 design and permitting category. So that's a new introduction. And then Phase 2 construction is divided into two different categories, a minor and a major category. And I'll review these in more details. Another change is we have 2 years to complete projects versus 3. And so this is just a quick overview of the major changes for this year. As I mentioned, 2 different categories, Phase 1, design and permitting, and Phase 2, construction. Each of these have a separate application process and requirements. You'll see on our program website that there are distinct applications for each. One is called P1, design and permitting, and the other is called P2 for construction. And you'll see those separately listed on the website. As before, we fund 2 different types of projects, either new construction, and it could be for motorized or non-motorized uses, and another type, what we call trail enhancement, and that is improvements to an existing facility that would either increase volume or accommodations, and I'll give you an example of that. This is an example of new construction where something didn't exist before. And then the trail enhancement is an improvement to an existing trail, either through the design, whether it be the width or the surface, but it is not for addressing deferred maintenance issues. One of the requirements for this category is to supply existing conditions documentation with photographs. Let me just give you an example of what this is. You see there on the left is a trail that is essentially a mowed path. And then on the right is an improved or trail enhancement where they improved it with a stone dust surface. Phase 1, let's talk a little bit about the requirements of each of the phases. Phase 1, design and permitting. As I mentioned before, pre-application meetings are required. And during that process, we'll help you assess the eligibility of the project and walk you through what the best submissions are related to materials and content, and just assess where you are in the overall feasibility of the project, what you might have accomplished already, and are you ready to begin the preliminary engineering, which is essentially what we'd be looking for in reviewing the application. So those are all the discussions we would have. Hold on, somebody's calling. Sorry. During pre-application for Phase 1 design and permitting. Specific requirements for this phase. we're asking individuals or grantees to submit a proposal that outlines the scope of work of the specific tasks that you expect to do for the design. It should also include a design fee with an hourly breakdown, and a lump sum would not be acceptable. We would need to see a breakdown of what's being done for each task. And also a cost estimate needs to be submitted as part of that design proposal. And the design and permitting award is maxed at 15% of the construction cost. And I'll walk through an example of how to get to that point a little bit further. Sorry. Design and permitting, there are award limits. For all categories, a minimum award will be $5,000. There's a lot of administrative paperwork to push around, so we felt it was important to establish a minimum. For phase one, there is a maximum, as I mentioned just a moment ago, 15% of the estimated construction cost is the maximum award. And again, 2 years to complete that phase of design and permitting. And essentially, what we're looking for as a final product of this phase would be construction documents or bid documents, something that you would hand to a contractor to say, we're ready to build. Here's our specs. So that would be plans and detailed plans that are beyond general assumptions and just basic typical cross sections, in-depth details of how everything will be bid. And it should also include specifications and an engineer's estimate, as well as permit approvals. So that phase essentially completes a final design package for all things needed for construction, to go to construction. Phase two, construction, includes two categories, minor and major, excuse me. And again, a pre-application is required if you're coming in for this category. We'll evaluate the eligibility and the constructability. Are you ready to go for construction? Do you have all your proper plans and permits in hand and ready to submit? That's what we'd be looking for in that application. The minor category of construction has criteria, and we felt this was important because we didn't want to make these minor or more simplistic projects onerous. We still wanted a category for those small and simple projects that can be done pretty seamlessly. So those that criteria is listed here. Again, the pre-app, the project should be 70,000 or under, 1 mile in length or less, be of natural surface, have slopes under 8%, have a minimum number of major features such as walls or bridges or other structural elements, and have minimal or no agency reviews required, and that's permitting. So these are kind of the parameters of the more simplistic projects that can be streamlined and don't necessarily need a full construction set of plans. We didn't want to make that onerous, so hence this separate category called minor construction. The application requirements, essentially to provide verification that your project meets those criteria, and whether that's a combination of maps, cross sections, conceptual plans. That'll probably be a variety of different things. So we didn't make this very specific, knowing that it would probably be a combination of things to show verification that you met this criteria. Construction major, the application requirements are essentially those final design plans and estimates to verify and confirm to the review committee that, yes, we are ready for construction. We know what this smells like, what it tastes like, where every signpost is, where every bench is, and a detail of all of that, and a schedule. So those are the requirements of the major construction category to submit that final package with your application to confirm you're ready to get the trucks on site and the front end loaders can show up. The funding limits for minor and major, again, minimum is $5,000. And minor, with looking at the criteria, the maximum award there is $70,000. And then major, as before, we capped it at what we're framing it around 60% of the available funding, unless there's a highly, highly exceptional project that the committee might consider otherwise. But, you know, to put some parameters on it, it's 60% of available funding. And essentially, the final products for this phase is the completed trail facility in accordance with the plans that you submitted and industry standards. The application process, again, two-step. One is letter of intent due the end of June. Second is the full application due the end of July. This is the program website. I highly recommend that you kind of poke around there, looking at all the application materials and the various forms. I'm going to try and go back and forth to our site in just a minute, so bear with me. Again, the letter of intent due the end of June is essentially to verify ownership and provide us documentation with deeds and easements that you do in fact own the property or have easements on the property. So that's what's requested there in submitting those things, as well as a project map showing us essentially where it is in relationship to your project. And we also ask for preliminary cost estimates just to get an early indication of what people are looking at. And here's an example of that letter of intent. It's pretty basic information, asking you what sort of category you're coming in for, design or construction, and is it minor or major. Here in number 3, is it a new trail or are you looking at trail enhancement? And then 4 and 5 is more municipal information and contact information. Number 6 is the deeds and telling us what block and lot it is. Is it owned or is it an easement? And is it permanently preserved public parkland? And checking that box over here. Category 7 is providing the map. And section 8 is, you know, very early preliminary estimates of what you think the project cost is, what your 20% will be, and an early insight as to what people are asking for. And you'll see there's 2 sections here. The highlighted blue is for design and permitting, and then on the right, highlighted in green, is for construction. And just a simple signature by the mayor is all that's needed here. But the most important thing on this is the deeds and verification of ownership. You can see design application, there are 11 components to that, and not terribly onerous, you know, applicant information, project information. I'm going to see if I can go to our webpage. Bear with me. Okay, here's our project Trail Grant Program webpage. The two different applications, P1 design and P2 for construction. Letter of intent. And there's also a full list of instructions and a checklist and a cost estimate. Go back and forth. Okay, I'm going to walk you through the design and permitting application. Let's go to that one. P1. So as I said, pretty basic information for the bulk of the application. Municipal contact and address. Section 2, project information. Is it new construction or enhancement? Section 3 is, a very brief description about what your project is, where it is, why it's important. Section 4 is a basic conceptual map showing us the vicinity of the project and any existing and proposed trails, major destinations. Section 5, trail design intent. This has been in our previous applications, and this is all coming out of the U.S. Forest Service. And forgive me, I'm going to go back and forth a little bit between this and my PowerPoint. Okay. The Section 5, the trail design intent, it comes directly out of the U.S. Forest Service Trail Fundamentals and Trail Management Objectives. That's a document you see the cover of here on the right side of the slide. This document is essentially the comparison of you engineers that might be on the call, AASHTO standards and MUTCD. This is the equivalent of trail design. So particularly if you're building less developed trails or more natural-based trails, I'll call it. And this is a resource that you'll pull from to establish these 3 criteria: the trail class, the designated use, and design parameters. And these are very important in creating and designing and constructing sustainable and quality level trails. And whoops, way too fast. Sorry, guys. This is a page directly from that document, and we talk about trail class. It goes from trail class 1 on up to 5, 5 being the most developed. 4 and 5 are essentially more like a paved trail like Lawanaga Brook. And those construction standards essentially are like building a single lane road. When you get into class 1 through 3, it becomes much more finessed, related to the details, and that's where these documents really come into play and be very important Further along, it tells you exactly what trail class design feature should be. Again, these are the trail standards of construction. The tread width, the design surface, the slopes and grades, and how all of those come together within each of the classes. So again, coming back to the application, trail design intent, fully developed class 4 and 5, less developed 1 through 3. And going to that document is where you'll find the answers or specifics related to your project. Surface type, asking you for the width and lengths of things to get a sense of what you're doing. So section 6 of phase 1, the design and permitting proposal or application, is asking you to develop and include a proposal as part of the submission. And the proposal should outline the specific tasks of preparing the plan and permitting for your project. And if you've worked with any engineer, you're familiar with preparing these proposals and getting you through that permitting process. So that's what the design proposal should include. It should also include an established fee and schedule. So as I mentioned earlier, the design fee is capped at 15% of the construction cost. And I'll give you an example of how to come to that in just a minute. Section 7, this is important in knowing with the schedule. Given we're working during the summer with these deadlines, the full application is due at the end of July. The thing I want to point out here is the time sensitivity of the resolution. If you're working with any summer schedules that have either delayed or a gap in some of your meetings, just keep that in mind. With the full application does require a resolution at the end of July submission. So just something to keep on your calendars for the timing of all that. Required signatures, the mayor and any licensed professional you're working with. And I mentioned before that there are some requirements that the grantee will be responsible for. And that such thing as, looking at the grant agreement, rules and regulations, providing advanced funding because this is a reimbursable program, completing the project within the 2-year time frame, notifying us if there are any changes from what the award was based on, and submitting quarterly reports. So there are requirements with the grant. Project cost and matching. So this is the design fee and the match requirements. So the design fee we're looking at a maximum cost of 15% of the construction cost. That should be your design fee, or very roughly within that limit. The required match is 20%. That's the minimum, and then subtracting that is your requested grant amount. Section 11, evaluation criteria. This is something that is continued with our applications. You've seen this before if you've participated in the program previously. It's describing how your project complies with some of these criteria: access, diversity, connectivity, concurrency, and funding. So just providing a brief description for all of those criteria. Okay, I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint a second. So project plans for the design and permitting phase. We realize these are very conceptual. You know, you're at a very beginning point of the project, so we expect that they will be very conceptual in nature, showing us, you know, in vicinity of major destinations, in proximity to existing trails, so on and so forth. The application process for phase 2 construction, minor and major, is pretty similar to the design application, with the exception of sections 6 and 7. As I mentioned before, the minor construction category has specific criteria, and the application requirements are basically to submit materials that verify or confirm that you meet those criteria. And that would be, you know, a combination of maps, plans, cross sections, to verify and depict how you'll construct that project. And this is just a simple example of what that might be. This was a very short trail going between a school and a park. And you know, this is a simple map showing the location and its limits and a cross section. So this might be a very good example of something that's plans that are submitted with a minor construction phase project. This is also something that might be submitted, an example of something that's submitted with minor construction. A very conceptual layout of existing and proposed, and a cross section of what's included. I highly recommend that the applications that are coming in for design and or minor construction use our existing cost estimate form that we have on our website. This is a form that we've required in previous years. We're not necessarily requiring it specifically this year, but it is very useful to get to a very preliminary cost estimate. So we highly recommend that you use that in your development of project cost for design and minor construction. And this can be found on the program website. Construction plans for phase 2 major, the kinds of plans that we would look to see submitted with the application. Again, as I mentioned before, this should tell us exactly what's being constructed and where. And this is an example of a previous project that used a more linear presentation in how their project was going to be constructed, using stationing and specific cross sections. You know, for instance, this is station 11 to 12. Station 11 to 12, and it's using construction type E. And we can easily find construction type E and understand that, yes, that's what they're building at that point. So again, the point here is very specific plans beyond general assumptions that include detailed information, multiple plan sheets of grading and utility, soil and erosion, addressing all aspects of construction is what we are looking to see in the submission, as well as very detailed line item construction cost estimates. Again, as I mentioned before, for both the design and construction phases, the support documentation of including a resolution with the full application is time sensitive, so just be aware of that. I'm going to give you some examples of the cost estimates in preparing those for your applications. As we mentioned, the design and permitting phase one, requires that your design fee be maxed at 15% of the construction cost. So essentially, that assumes you're preparing a very early preliminary cost estimate to get to that number. I'm just going to give you an example of what that is. So let's assume you used the program cost estimation sheet, and you've determined that your project preliminarily cost $230,000. So based on that, your design fee would be maxed at 15% or $35,000. And a matching contribution of 20% would be $7,000, with your requested grant coming in at 28. So all of that would be to develop preliminary and final design plans. That's what we're looking to see with a submission under phase one, design and permitting. So you will have to do some very early cost estimates of your project to assume a 15% design fee. Let's keep moving on. Again, I highly encourage you to use this existing cost estimate form on the program website to get some very kind of back of the envelope numbers started for your project. The application, the phase two construction minor, again, using that very early cost estimate form. You know, the minor is capped at $70,000, assuming this is a very small and simplistic project. We're assuming that would be a max. The 20% match for the grantee to cover would be $14,000, and your requested grant would end up being $56,000. Again, another example of this cost estimate form that would be helpful in getting you to the construction cost. For phase two, major construction, again, assuming you have a larger project, it's probably going to be in the couple $100,000. In this example, it's $275,000. The 20% match would be $55,000, and your requested grant would be $220,000. As I mentioned, the evaluation process, the first review will be by staff to make sure that your application meets basic program requirements and has all the proper paperwork and materials submitted and filled out. And upon that review, we may contact you for additional information and clarification. So you may hear, after your submission, you may be contacted by us to provide a little bit more detail or clarify some questions. As I mentioned, in the review by the advisory committee, they'll be looking at that evaluation criteria that you're going to fill out at the last section of the application. They'll also be looking at the readiness to complete and your understanding of the overall project, as well as any responses from the Q&A session in October. And as I mentioned, that could be virtual or via email. Then there'll be deliberations above, among the committee, and then recommendations to the county commissioners. I do want to point out that, you know, because we have two different categories this year, design and construction, all projects will be competing together. We did not separate out the available funding, we have, it wasn't split 50-50 for, category of design and category of construction. All projects will compete amongst each other. Excuse me. As I mentioned, the Q&A, October 27th. You'll be, if there are questions, we'll provide those in advance and give you enough opportunity to respond in advance. As I mentioned, pre-applications are required for all applicants, and it's a process that will help guide you. If you don't know where you are in the process, should I go in for design, should I go in for construction, we can help point you in the right direction and give you insight as to, what's the best materials that you should be submitting and how to prepare them. And talk you, if you're coming in for potentially the minor construction, talking you through some of those criteria and how those might be conveyed in your application. And also what we would expect to see in more detail with if you're coming in for major construction documents. Again, as I mentioned, pre-applications will be held from May. That's incorrect. It should say May to July. I apologize. They're scheduled in advance by contacting me. Either you can call me or reach out to me via email. This is my contact information. We'll get you on the calendar. It shouldn't take, any longer than an hour and a half tops if we really get into the weeds. But, in the past, everyone has found this most helpful to do this in advance. It gives the staff insight into the kind of project that you're looking to do, so that we can better inform the advisory committee, and it gives the applicant better guidance on how to prepare their submission. Again, this is our schedule, overviewed. Letter of intent, the end of June, full applications, the end of July, awards by the end of the year, at least announced. And we hope to kind of keep that same momentum. That's the presentation. I know that's a lot to take in. There's a lot of changes. I highly recommend that you go to our website, which I'm trying to get to again. Okay. There we go. As I mentioned, the applications are here, as well as instructions and checklists. That cost estimate sheet I keep referring to is located here, as well as the U.S. Forest Service trail fundamentals I was talking about related to the design features. Okay. So, that's the presentation. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to field them now. If you want to read through the applications a little further and contact me after, we can do that as well, but, you know, pre-application meetings. Someone's just sending me an email. Sorry. Not trail related. So we are very excited to introduce the design phase as part of this year's application process and availability. We think that that is will bring some additional communities who haven't really tapped this program yet. And you know, maybe they had been apprehensive in the past to expend the dollars for design. We're hoping it brings more people to the table to participate in the program. As I mentioned, we have $1.6 million available this year. We've funded 29 grants so far, and it's been a big success through many communities, and there's 8 projects completed to date, and several more are nearing their completion over the next couple of months. Great. Well, everybody's an expert at this point, I'm sure.
Well, thank you, Denise. I'd just like to say that your presentation was so comprehensive that it left us with a few questions,
Yeah, there you
or
go,
maybe,
Tom.
or maybe none.
Well, I'm glad you're on the call, and you know, feel free to reach out when you're ready to schedule something, and we'll help you prepare the best application.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, well, if there are no questions here, I don't expect any additional people to be coming on the call at this point. I'm going to go off and I think enjoy some of this beautiful day.
Sounds good.
All right, again, reach out when you want to schedule anything. I'll be here.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
Thank you.